Hello, my name's Susan. I'm actually a world peace clown. I know I don't look like one at the moment, but I'm undercover. I've decided to talk a little bit about my work in peace and what inspired me in order to inspire you to also look for this. In 1998, I had a dream that I was teaching peace. It seemed impossible at the time because I'd already had an education as an economist, and it just seemed it would be a huge commitment to become a teacher of peace. And so I rang a friend of mine and asked him, does anybody teach peace in the schools? And his response to me was, they teach war and peace, but there's no curriculum to peace. Because what the feeling was in the dream was some sort of curriculum, so that we're actually being grounded in values, and then we're learning about life and how we interact with one another. Life skills felt important. Anyway, I was living in Canberra at the time, and I moved to Melbourne not long after. And it was there that I was living 5 minutes from La Trobe University. And at the same time, I'm thinking, do I stay in market research, which was my profession, or do I do humanitarian work? And what ended up happening was what felt like for me a fork in the road. And I found out that there was actually a peace education, peace studies course at La Trobe University. So another aspect of that was that I'd heard about Helen Caldicott, who was an anti-nuclear activist back in the 60s, and she'd spoken to presidents in the United States. She'd started Physicians for Social Responsibility, where herself as a doctor, she made the decision to actually start to work for world peace through nuclear disarmament. Now, I'd seen her on television probably, I think, 6 months prior to that, and it was through watching her on television that I had the feeling to remember her. Now, at the same time, when I'm in Melbourne, close to La Trobe University, I was Googling peace, because that's really the only thing I could think of that I wanted to do. And as a result of that, I found Helen Caldicott. So I wrote to her, and to my amazement, she wrote back, and then I sent my CV to her, and she sent me her telephone number. So I ended up driving up to Matcham, where she lived, and I had an afternoon with her, and she did make me read a couple of her books. Missile Envy was one. That was funny. Well, funny in name, but in truth that was about scientists who project onto their missiles some sort of creation, that they're creating something great. You can just imagine the wild hair. Anyway, I sat with her and we talked about peace, and she said to me that she had known Patch Adams, because I'm a clown, so Patch is a clown. That's why that came up. And they'd done a protest march in New York called The Naked Truth. They walked naked. And I said, well, it must have been hard in New York. I hope it wasn't winter, for both their sakes. Anyway, she excitedly showed me her photos, and she encouraged me to do peace studies. Now, for me, at that time, there didn't seem a career path in peace at all. But nonetheless, my feeling was to follow my heart, not to go for the money. I could have stayed in market research and made $100,000 a year, but instead my feeling was to go in the peace direction. I'd been doing clowning at hospitals, and I had found that the clowning really a wonderful way of connecting with other human beings and just showing love and compassion in a hospital environment. And of course there's no pay for that, so this is done from love. So as a result of my conversation with Helen, I drove another 1,000 kilometres back to Melbourne, because Matcham to Melbourne round trip is 2,000 k's, and I did that on a credit card. Such was my feeling at the time. And then I enrolled at La Trobe University, and I actually enrolled in peace studies. I think it's one of the few in the country that actually do have a curriculum on peace studies. And this was more to do with things like human rights and environment. I also studied Gandhi's work, which I felt very strongly connected to. And we also had an area of mediation, so learning how to resolve conflict was very important. So La Trobe University was the beginning.